Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back with hopefully less depressing Genshin Impact lore reading for weapons and artifacts in Inazuma. We just finished reading the lore, which encompasses like the Watatsumi and Shogunate war that happened like hundreds of years ago, and the tragic obliteration aftermath of that, which happened to the Watatsumi forces. And like just the tragedy of like how they all kind of lost something, including both sides kind of had losses that were pivotal to what went on for the rest of the lore regarding Inazuma. But I'm pretty sure it's not going to stop there. We're getting into Raiden Gokuden lore, and I know a lot of people have been really antsy and excited and looking forward to this because apparently this lore focuses a bit on Scaramouche, which we now know a bit more about his 3 betrayals and like the inner stories of what happened with the Raiden Gokuden from the Iridori festival to the Sumeru Archon quest and everything else in between. But yeah, we're gonna jump right in with the Husk of Opulent Dreams set. Oh, actually, no. Before I get into the Husk of Opulent Dreams, we have to read Ayato's weapon first. The Haran Gapaku Futsu, a famed work from a Futsu line of smiths. The name Haran comes from the manner in which it resembles the violent roiling waves. This blade was recorded in the anthology of Inazuman blades written by Inspector Michihiro Nagamasa of Tatarasuna. Interesting. There are 2 swords of the Gapaku Futsu series made by the Futsu school in order: Haisu, the wave spike, and Haran, the splitting upheaval. Of these 2, the Haran is the sole blade forged by the great smithy Masagomaru that remains extant. Some say the blades are indwelt by the souls of those who forged them. This is how the anthology begins. It is said that the Hasui blade was forged by a 3rd generation master of the school, Master Futsu Minori. All right, let me write some of these names down. Its blade was a pale blue, and its Haman was as beauteous as rippling water, and so it was oft found at the waist of the shoguns of Valiant. Later, the blade would be broken during a mortal duel to decide the fate of the Oni people, and was sent back for reforging. At the time, Minori, who had now been long tortured by alcohol, old wounds, and the lingering memories of Tataragami, Jesus Christ, was a broken woman. Oh my god, it was a woman too? Not unlike an untempered steel sword. Nor could the 4th generation head Futsu Hiroyoshi match his mother's skill. So we got a whole family line in here. Let me write that down. It was his sworn son, Futsu Masayoshi, the one they call... Oh, wait, what? Holy shit. Oh my god, it all comes back around. So Minori was the 3rd gen master of the school. She could not reforge the blade. Her son couldn't reforge the blade, but his son went on to become the one known as the great smith who was the sole blade forger of the Haran. That's actually really neat. Oh, brother. Sorry, brother, not son. He was the one who could forge this weapon, allowing the Futsu's school's masterpiece to re-enter the world. The 2 Gapaku Futsu blades would look very similar to one another, but their qualities were in fact vastly different. Masagomaru would only come to name this one work. And the reason why that happened is quite simple. He was an orphan, taken in by the 3rd generation master, illiterate by education and aphasic from birth. When ordered to revive the beauty of the Hasui blade, he inscribed its name just as it had before. When Futsu Minori passed on, Masagomaru would help her pass her forging techniques onto Hiroyoshi. Indeed, it is said that she had wished for him to take up the mastery of their school, but he demurred multiple times. In fact, the fame from the forging of the Haran very nearly affected Hiroshi's succession to be the 4th generation head. As such, safe in the knowledge that his sworn brother was now independent, Masagomaru would choose to depart for other lands. Later, he would approach other forging schools, gleaming gems of wisdom from other famed smiths. In his latter years, he would have 3 pupils that he was most proud of. Oh my god. Kaedehara Kagemitsu, which I think is Kazuha's great-great-grandfather, Niwa Nagamitsu, and Akame Mitsunaga. The 3 would create the Isshin Sensaku, the 3 great works of the Isshin art. Wow, that's so cool. Then I was but a born mute, an ugly, filthy, abandoned child. Like a moth, I longed for warmth in the bitter, cold nights, and what I found was the forge fires of the smithy. Standing before me was the third generation master, she who people called surly and arrogant, but she did not bid me to get gone, and even gave me some rice to fill my stomach. Seeing that I was covered in metallic sand, she named me Masagomaru. Interesting. Unable to speak but subtle in thought, Masagomaru must have had many stories hidden away in his heart. All these unsaid things would finally sink as sediment, disappearing beneath the waves. The third generation master would tell me, one who could not speak a great many things, like the old wound that afflicted one side of her body, like the wishes of her mother and brother, like the crimson hakama she could never wear, and the great wave that would one day devour everything. One night, the child would enter the smithy, seeing the famed but capricious smith within. She hammered at a chunk of iron, not caring as tears streamed down her face. You forgot what you just saw. We clear about that? Oh, okay. Forget what you saw. You didn't see me doing this. He nodded, flustered. Then the woman suddenly clapped her hands together and smiled broadly. Right, silly me. You're a good friend, a real keeper of secrets. I suppose it is as they say, one who leans into the drink is themselves not to be leaned on too much. But now that I think about it, I should have still accepted her offer to drink together. The anthology also speaks of the differences in forms between the Gepatsu Fuku blades. The one forged by Futsu Minori was as gently beauteous as the ocean at night, and thus was named Hasui. The one made by Mute Masayoshi was formidable as the driving hurricane, and thus named Haran. That's actually a really cool story of kind of like a master and apprentice storytelling. Yeah, really cool that it also mentions like the Kaedehara line, the Niwa line, the Akame line that went on to create the different branches of the Isshin art, which was pretty neat too. And so with that interesting piece of lore, learning how this weapon was forged and its history with the Futsu school, I should say, we are going to be transitioning to the Husk of Opulent Dreams. Reading order, we're going to start with the sands. As far as Inazuma is concerned, this is some small object from overseas. The heart of this mechanism has been removed and its hands no longer turn. Here we go. He was originally born to be a vessel for a heart, but he shed tears in his dreams. His creator observed thus. He was too fragile, whether it be as a human or as a tool. He was originally born to be a vessel for a heart, Makoto's gnosis. He shed a tear, which conveyed emotion, which told A that he's too gentle to be seen as a human or as a tool. Yet his creator would not destroy him, and so allowed him to continue slumbering. In her latter work, she would also co-sign designs that might store such a heart to obsolescence. Not long after, that noblest and most prestigious proof of the world would come to have no home, and thus was sent to the great shrine at Mount Yugo. Later, the beautiful puppet awoke. So it's basically saying she tried to find ways to co-sign designs to store the gnosis, but after a while she couldn't find any home for it, so she gave it to Yai Miko at the shrine at Mount Yugo. I see what that means now. Gotcha. They worded that pretty eloquently. Later, the beauteous puppet awoke and began his wandering. He observed many a heart, good ones, upright ones, strong ones, gentle ones. The puppet too desired a heart. Later, the lovely puppet would finally obtain that heart. It was, after all, his purpose for being the very reason he existed. Yet it was not what the puppet truly desired, for it did not contain any blessings, but was instead a sacrifice, brimming with selfishness, hypocrisy, cunning, and curses, all wrapped up in an amiable husk. The heart of Niwa. It's so crazy how I now understand. Like, reading this, I'd be like, that heart, what are they talking about? And then when you play the Archon Quest interlude chapter for Sumeru, it's like, wow, like that quest pretty much contextualizes, I assume, this whole artifact set, which is incredible. He finally obtained a heart not of his own, and he didn't even know that it was Niwa's at the time. Good and evil are the songs of sentient life, useless and cacophonous, but if he were to retch this heart out, he would no longer be able to feel anything at all. Oh boy, chat, this is rough. Now we're getting back into like Scaramouche depression season. Calabash of Awakening. A gourd that has been adorned with powdered gold and black paint. Its original color can no longer be discerned, but its main purpose seems to be as a performing prop. Oh my god, the 5 schools. Amenoma, Futsu, Isshin, Hyakume, Senju. These were, once upon a time, the 5 branches of the Raiden Gokuden. But today, only Amenoma still maintains its line of succession. Kazuha's bringing back the Isshin, all right? Come on now. While the Isshin line can just barely be said to have extant descendants, in the eyes of the people, it was just a natural result of the ravages of time. They never once suspected that such sudden falls from grace may have some hidden mystery behind them. The Wanderer would never admit to this. He would never admit that he had done this as an act of revenge against the Bladesmith, nor would he ever mention the truth. Then he had abandoned his schemes halfway because they suddenly became dull. He would only say, in that tone of voice he had learned from a certain researcher, it was all just a little experiment into human nature. Dottore. So, he basically learned a thing or two from Dottore. Like, Dottore fucking with the Mikage furnace taught him that you could pretty much mess with people until you don't feel like it anymore, and then move on to something else. In Inazuma's traditional theater, there was a certain character known as Bruh. There was a certain character known as Kunikazushi. Such characters are often schemers and usurpers of nations. At the end of his wandering, he chose this name as an act of his own will. And as for the name that he once used, even he no longer remembers it. Well, he goes by Galileo nowadays, okay? Get used to it. It is a norm in Inazuma's traditional theater to join the names of a play's 3 acts together to form the play's name. For example, Sumire Zome, Sangetsu, and Kogetsukan come together, thus forming the play Sumire Zome Sangetsu Kogetsukan. Very big mouthful there. Perhaps a day will come when this body's adventures, its experiences, will become tales to be passed on by mortals, distant memories that flow through the ley lines. But for now, his 3rd act is still ongoing. That's actually really clever, because his 3rd act came through in version 3.3. So like the fact that they like actually doubled down on this 3rd act mindset for him was really clever for when we got it. Wow, this is really well fleshed out. It even talks about like obviously the distant memories that flow back, that flow through the ley lines. So even this, I mean, ley lines were always established to be just that, but like it was like a while ago, like Raiden Story Quest, that we first really kind of understood that ley lines contained memories of the past. Knowing what I know now and contextualizing this stuff that was released back during like 2.4 or whatever, it's actually really incredible to like put all of that together. All right, next up. Bloom Times, a small golden ornament with 6 petals that can never wilt. It symbolizes the transience of mortal glories. What he saw in his dreams was a phantom dancing to the music under the moonlight, just like a young man in the distant past who is akin to the blank sheets of paper, and like a pure yet fragile persona emerging once the resentment and suffering had dissipated. The Wanderer did not know that he had any faculties of dreaming, which is interesting because this man can dream because he doesn't have an Akasha, despite him going to the land where no one can dream. Thinking that this might have been the researcher's little trick. Oh, or it could have been something that Dottore was doing. Or perhaps it was the infinitesimal resistance of that bygone heart. You had acquired the heart that you had always dreamed of, but it was but a mere prop of lies and deception. Now you will finally obtain what belongs to you, and that false construct of a body can at last aspire to powers over this world. Yet, this is all but a fleeting dream of glory, and it will all one day drift away amidst the sighs of a suffering earth. Was it a him from the past who said this, or him from the future? The vagrant cared not, for when he awakened, he was not he, but that ethereal future that dissipated. Yeah, this is pretty interesting. So it mentions, was this him from the past or him from the future? I'm wondering, I don't know how this relates to what we know of him now, like with him tapping into Irminsul, but like, if this foreshadowed what they planned for Scaramouche to go through during his Archon quest, that's incredible that they had already had that story lined out that far in advance. Yeah, when his past self, present self, and future self were all like connected with each other. That was actually a really interesting point. I think it was the point before he got his vision, like that moment that you see. So I wonder if there's a chance that other artifacts could be foreshadowing future events. We just don't know it. Like, because reading this, it's just kind of like a what the hell kind of moment. But because I know the future compared to when this came out, it actually makes a lot of sense now. Wow, wow, wow. That is incredible. Yeah, and it also mentions here that he had like this thought process of like, now you can finally obtain what belongs to you, and this false construct of a body can at last aspire to power over this world, aka ascending to become a god, which is what his whole plan was after a certain point. That's insane how they foreshadowed that so far ago, which tells me that they're like at least a year ahead in terms of Genshin story writing and plot and whatnot. I think it's all fully fleshed out. Like, I think the story of Genshin is already finished. It's just executing it now through the game. All right, next up, we have Plume of Luxury, a feather-shaped token that was brought forth from a secluded hall. The compassion of its creator led to it being left within the mansion alongside a certain slumbering form. This might be the feather his mom gave him, right? The long, wandering eccentric no longer thinks about this, but when he closes his eyes, he can still see the moonlit nights over Tatarasuna and the burning furnace flames. The kind young deputy said, "This golden ornament is a proof of identity granted by the almighty shogun, but as you travel the world, please bear this in mind, never to reveal your identity to others." The upright inspector said, "This golden ornament may be a proof of identity granted by the almighty shogun, but you are neither human nor mechanism, so I can only deal with you in this fashion. Do not hold this against me." Oh dear. The wanderer who was left yesterday in the dust no longer thinks about it, but when he closes his eyes, he can still hear the wild winds that roared that year. A pair of expectant eyes said, "This golden ornament is a proof of identity granted by the almighty shogun. It must surely be able to save the people." The intelligent, lovely shrine maiden said, "This gold ornament is a proof of identity granted by the almighty shogun, and she will not abandon you." About that. "As for me, I shall do my best to send for help immediately." But in the end, the golden arrow feather was covered in dust, and all tales were incinerated in karmic flames until nothing remained. Yikes. Yeah, so this was his life as the Kabukimono, and having his identity at the Tatarasuna, and then everyone basically having a different perspective of him based on the knowledge that of this feather. Like, one person was like, "I know who you are, and don't tell anybody." Someone was like, "I know who you are, and I'm a little sussed out." Someone else was like, "I know who you are. You should be able to save people." And then someone was also like, "I know who you are. Your mom didn't abandon you, but we can send for help," for like the whole Tatarasuna incident. Going into the order, the deputy would be Katsuragi, the inspectors Nagamasa, a pair of expectant eyes, I don't know who that would be, and then the lovely shrine maiden might have been Yaimiko. Dottore, oh, that could be Dottore as his cover-up identity. Expectant eyes, this can surely be able to save the people, and that's how he like spun the whole like, "Oh, you have to be a sacrifice with this heart and go into the freaking furnace and save everyone." Yeah, Dottore really fucked up everything, man. All right, and lastly, we have the skeletal hat, a hat that once shielded a wanderer from sun and rain. It eventually became a convenient tool with which faces would be hidden and expressions obscured. "Where are you going, wanderer?" The rolling youth had stopped by a child's shout. That was a child of a Tatarasuna craftsperson, and while he was ill, his eyes were still clear. Yeah, the third betrayal, ladies and gentlemen. The youth told the child that he was bound for Inazuma City, but it's raining really hard right now. They say that the people who left haven't returned. The youth opened and closed his mouth a few times, but at last could only give the child a small smile. The next time he set foot on that island, the child was nowhere to be found. "Where are you going, Inazuman? This boat is not for you." The wandering young boy was halted at the harbor by a boatman, but before the youth could draw his blade, a man in his company stopped him. The man told the mariner that the outsider youth was with him. "Ah, so he's your guest, sir. My apologies for my presumption." The man gave the youth a coat to keep the cold out, but the youth shook his head. He had no need for such things. He only wished to know what interesting things he might find on this long journey. Lord Harbin, oh my gosh, this is like an evolution of his life. As a wanderer, as an Inazuman, as a harbinger. Lord Harbinger, where are you headed? The youth, Hating chatty humans the most gave his subordinate a backhand slap, but he also loved watching expressions of horror and helplessness play across human faces. Jesus. And it was perhaps precisely because of this imbecilic underling's expressiveness that he had kept them around. He took the groveling, quailing figures that were heading east from Mondstadt. Oh my god. I understand. I'll get your bodyguards ready right now. He had no need for guards, of course, but he was lazier still to barter words with Cretans. Donning his wanderer's hat, he headed eastward alone. Version 1.1. This is the events that led him to go to Mondstadt to kill the Traveler during the Unreconciled Stars event. Wow, that's so cool. They even referenced it this far back. Child, where are you going? Returning home, the youth was stopped at the roadside by an old woman. He had told her that he was going west. To Yashiori Island, then? What business are you on? She had said this thoughtlessly without knowing that things had not been peaceful of late. The youth thanked her for the concern with earnest smile and told her that he was bound to an appointed meeting. As the boat gradually approached the shore, the lady in foreign garb could be seen standing at the shoreline, and she threw a small crystal sphere at the youth from afar. Catching it with ease, he lifted it up to the dying, bloodied sun. What's this last encounter all about? Ah, it could be Signora, actually. Yeah. She threw a small crystal sphere at the youth from afar. Maybe that could be a delusion? Oh, man, this was actually really nice. At this point, reading this during version 3.3, a lot of it is very much just like the details of like the greater explanations of what I already know. It's just kind of like an overview of what I already know based on the fact that it took me this long to get into the lore through this artifact set. But retroactively, it's incredible how much groundwork they laid out for Scaramouche's storyline with the Raiden Gokuden for Iridori Festival, for the Sumeru Archon quest and everything that happened with the Archon quest and the interlude chapter. They kind of created whole events and whole quest lines off of the lore of this artifact set, which was pretty dope. With all of this artifact stuff out of the way now, we are going to shift to the last weapon of the Raiden Gokuden set, which is going to be Kagotsurube Isshin, the former sentient sword of Kaedehara Kazuha's story quest, which was a really dope story quest that like pretty much established Kazuha reviving the Isshin art of forging, which was pretty cool with that dope cutscene. So we're gonna check this out, and then I think this is going to wrap up everything regarding the Raiden Gokuden plotline. So here we go. This famed blade was born in a nation to the far north, potentially Snezhnaya, but in the name of Isshin, it was stained with many dark deeds in its homebound journey. So it possessed people, those people killed, all in the attempts for the host to bring the blade back to Inazuma for Kazuha to challenge the Musono Hirotachi to become known as the most powerful blade in existence. A long blade, the color of blood, upon which has been bestowed the name Isshin. It is remarkably sharp and vividly ominous. It is said that this blade could easily cleave through a porous bamboo basket and the water within it before the latter could even leak out. People often say that within the body of every blade rests a blade spirit. Then it is natural to assume that a blade forged by the Tatarigami is dwelled by a demon of malice. I mentioned this during Kazuha's storyline, during the story quest that we did for this weapon. I mentioned it too, that if this blade was forged in the north, Snezhnaya, and it's forged using Tatarigami, then that means that there is a deceased god or a corpse of a god or a Tatarigami source that allowed the blacksmith to create this weapon in the first place. And I think that's going to be really interesting if there is like an Orobashi level deceased god from like the Archon War of the past there or something. Either that, or maybe Dottore brought some crystal marrow back and like distributed it to the people, and the forger got some on his hands and use that. I don't know. That's all pretty interesting. I hope we see and learn more about that when we go to Snezhnaya in like 3 years. The renowned blade Kagotsurube Isshin is forged by the bladesmith. Oh, we're getting the name? I don't think we got the name of the swordsmith in the quest. So the renowned blade Kagotsurube Isshin is forged by the swordsmith Akame Kananaga. All right, so give me 1 second. I actually want to double check something. Oh, okay. So no, it was Akame Mitsunaga. This is Akame Kananaga, which is dangerously close. I wonder if this is like the same person even, but like this person went on to make the Isshin art, but Akame Mitsunaga is dangerously close to Akame Kananaga, and I thought they were the same. A little confused right there, chat. The renowned blade Kagotsurube Isshin is forged by the swordsman Akame Kananaga, who failed to become the head blacksmith. Though forged by the hand of an Inazuman blacksmith, this blade was not made in the nation of thunder and jade steel, but in a snow-covered land in the far north. If beheld in the moonlight, the blade's hamen would look as if it were flowing, like the blood and tears of a wayfaring wanderer. The Tatarigami is pure malice by nature. It bears resentment against mortal desire. Swords are merely instruments of misfortune. Without wickedness, they will not birth slaughter. Without hate, they will never know the taste of blood. Isshin is the stillness of the mind. Complete juxtaposition. Isshin is the stillness of the mind, free from distractions. This purity of desire empowered the swordsman to forge tirelessly. But by this token, resentment against living beings is the metal from which the blade that kills shall be forged. In their frenzied practice to practice Isshin, the Kage school had always pursued the forging of a killer blade that could reach the extremes of lethality. Yeah, the Akame school. So this person might have gone to the Akame school. As such, the body and mind of the members of the Akame school were often withdrawn and short-spanned, their hearts venomously graven. The blades made by the Akame school were keen indeed, but many of them had some evil within that ultimately led to the school itself being regarded by the authorities as undesirable. So these motherfuckers are just bloodthirsty. For this reason, the Akame school's position as the leader of the Isshin art passed down from Mitsunaga did not last 3 generations before being rescinded by the authorities. After that, Akame Kananaga was involved in the case of the eccentric and committed treason. This led him to change his name and leave for the snow-covered nation in the far north to make a humble living in the land ruled by imperious ice. The only wish of the deceased Kaedehara was to see the Isshin art celebrated by those who understood a sword's beauty. But the swordsman, the blade, and the Tatarigami were all tools and titles for people to wield. I spent half of my life in pursuits of the vanity that is the Isshin art. It only turned out that I had become another Kaedehara. Ah, what's done is done. My only hope is that the sword born in the ice and frost will not be as weak as its useless titles. The Kaedehara clan were master swordsmiths whose work best symbolized Masagomaru's style, while the Niwa clan were humble and diligent, skilled in clay tempering. In their frenzied passion to practice Isshin, the Akame school had always pursued the forging of a killer blade that could reach the extreme of lethality. As he passed away amidst the vast snow, the man only wished to forge a renowned blade that would restore the name of Kaedehara and wish back the recognition of the people. And I guess he got his wish. The sword made its way back into the hands of Kaedehara Kazuha, who also fucking popped off against the Raiden Shogun. It's such a cool way of thinking about how the sword's journey, maybe the sword inherited the will of its creator to seek out Kazuha for that specific reason too, because it knew that through Kazuha it would be able to restore the honor and recognition that the Kaedehara clan had for swordsmanship and the Isshin art, and that's basically what Kazuha turned out to be in the end. Nice. This was a great story regarding the whole Kazuha situation too. And again, it goes back to the forging of blades, the Raiden Gokuden and all of that. That's actually really cool how the storylines have been all kind of tethered together despite all of these weapons and stories being told at different times. But yeah, so we've made it through Raiden Gokuden. We're actually going to be doing a reading next for the artifact set of Thundering Fury, which is an artifact set found in Mondstadt, but refers to the lore of Kapatsir at Seirai Island. So very excited to get into that next.